And if an illegal person who's here illegally commits a crime in Canada, often the name and description will not be included in the paper reporting about what happened. And I think that that's a disservice to Canadians. But even more egregious now is somebody went on a stabbing spree in Vancouver and the police shot and killed them. And they're not going to release the names on that. So interesting. They shot and killed a guy. And they're just going to bury that. They're just going to put that under the rug. Don't look under the rug. There's probably a dead body or two under there. Don't pay any attention. Don't worry. No crime was committed because we, the police, shot him. And so you don't need to worry about what his name was, citizens. Was he out on bail? Probably. Was he an illegal? Probably. Should he have been stabbing people out in the public in Vancouver? Probably not. And will we ever know? No. Of course not. Of course not. They don't want to tell us at all. Fall economic statement forthcoming. No, not really. Not really. Not at all, actually. Syria. Joe Biden is starting airstrikes. 75 targets were targeted. And after Trump asked him, don't do that, of course, Biden said, yeah, the United States is fully committed to this. And they back the people who did this. And help me understand how removing Bashar al-Assad is a good thing when you're replacing him with al-Qaeda. How is that positive? I'm not entirely sure, but our Canadian government seems to think so. So there's lots going on, and we have to start in Syria. So let's get to it. First, Syria. Sundance says, yeah, this right here. I said the same earlier. It's all a gift. The CIA backed the guys that did this, the same guys that wiped out the Yazidi and other minorities. And Western governments try to pretend this is okay. It's not more than that. They try and pretend that they're on the side of like goodness. Funding any of this is bad. I'm not taking any sides in the Middle East. I have no idea who's right, who's wrong, or whatever. I'm agnostic about what happens in the Middle East. I'm talking about in our country, in Canada and the West, and in North America, United States specifically. We base a lot of our foreign policy on who can we put in, how can we do regime change? How can we put somebody in who's very, very agreeable to U.S. North American interests? And yeah, let's action that, right? And so Dr. Anastasia says, so we're not mad at al-Qaeda anymore? It's such a weird thing, right? It's such a weird thing. In 2001, we were supposed to destroy al-Qaeda. Now we're helping them take charge in Syria and deposing Christian dictators like Bashar al-Assad, who I saw a report yesterday he was confirmed to be in Russia. So apparently his plane didn't go down. He's in Russia and with his family. So that's interesting. That's interesting news, I thought. Cat Turd says, can someone explain to me why we should give a care what happens in Syria when we have our own problems to fix in the United States? Michael Knowles says, can someone explain to me why we're supposed to celebrate Bashar al-Assad's replacement by a member of al-Qaeda? Great questions. Great questions abound. Everybody's asking very good questions. JD Vance weighs in as well. He's responding to Josh, and Josh says, Syria is free. The rebels won. The people liberated themselves from tyranny. Freedom won. Russia, Iran, Hezbollah, and Assad lost. Historic. The road ahead for Syria won't be easy, but it will be better than the past. The world should celebrate Syria's liberation and help it succeed. Vance says, as President Trump said, this is not our fight, and we should stay out of it. Aside from that, opinions like the below make me nervous. The last time this guy was celebrating events in Syria, we saw the mass slaughter of Christians and a refugee crisis that destabilized Europe. Here's Benny Johnson announcing breaking. President Biden reveals that the U.S. support for the Syrian rebellion focused on empowering the people to create a new regime. He also suggests sending aid to the country. Indeed, they are sending aid, billions for Syrian aid. And here's just a little bit of Biden. It's a 6-minute speech. We're just going to listen to a bit now, and then there's 21 seconds in the next section as well. Here we go.
It's also a moment of risk and uncertainty. As we all turn to the question of what comes next, the United States will work with our partners and the stakeholders in Syria to help them seize an opportunity to manage the risks.
Build back better?
For years, the main backers of Assad have been Iran, Hezbollah, and Russia. But over the last week, their support collapsed, all three of them, because all three of them are far weaker today than they were when I took office. And let's remember why. After Hamas attacked Israel on October the 7th, 2023, when much of the world responded with horror, Iran and its proxies chose to launch a multi-front war against Israel. That was a historic mistake on Iran's part. Today, Iran's main territorial proxy, Hezbollah, is also on its back. Only 12 days ago, I spoke from the Rose Garden about the ceasefire deal in Lebanon, a deal that was only possible because Hezbollah has been badly degraded.
So this is a U.S. I said yesterday, it smells like a U.S. coup, looks like Iraq, when Iraq happened. And I was seemingly right. So here's a little snippet, 20 seconds of Biden. Further, Sean says Biden is now pledging humanitarian aid to Syria this week. He has sent aid to Angola, Ukraine, and now he's sending aid to Syria, while Americans who are sleeping in tents in North Carolina through freezing temperatures get nothing. And so, yep, the American regime hates America, and they want to launder all of the money out of the tax base as much as possible. And they hated Julian Assange for exposing them. And now they're just exposing themselves. But is there anybody to stop them? Can Trump even stop them?
With a new constitution, a new government that serves all Syrians. And this process will be determined by the Syrian people themselves. In the United States,
just like the Iraqis determined their own way forward, right?
We'll do whatever we can to support them, including through humanitarian relief, to help restore Syria after more than a decade of war and generations of brutality by the Assad family.
Right. So pretty scary stuff going on in Syria. Shea says Trump urges Biden not to get involved in Syria. Biden suddenly orders dozens of strikes in Syria. Remarkable. So this is press release, United States headquarters of Central Command. U.S. Central Command conducts dozens of airstrikes to eliminate ISIS camps in central Syria. U.S. Central Command forces conducted dozens of precision airstrikes targeting known ISIS camps and operatives in central Syria, December 8th. So there you go. They're striking Syria. And MBR or MBP says exactly this. The quote on the top says, "We love Israel. Syrian terrorists credit Israeli strikes for shock advance." And the Greater Israel program, and there are Greater Israel patches, as far as I understand, on the IDFs. Like they have military patches on their shoulders that have this Greater Israel stretch goal, I suppose. So is this all about a land grab, basically? Yeah. And what's the reason behind all of this land grab? Finance a lot says the major oil and natural gas pipelines run through Syria. That's why the U.S. was defending the territory, so that Russia wouldn't have power over supply to Europe and the West. Ukraine is also has major pipelines. That's why Russia wants control of it. NATO forces are in Latvia. So yeah, the geography of the region matters, right? And so it's interesting to watch all of these conflicts move. There's movement on them, and it seems like it's all about control. It's all about who's controlling the flow of energy through pipelines and all of that stuff. And wow, right? Like I'm not surprised that it all boils down to money and control of energy, but it seems really obvious when it's put like that. And so in order to seize control and prevent support through Lebanon to Hezbollah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the U.S. and to take control of these pipelines, the U.S. is backing Al-Qaeda. Isn't that weird? Like, the enemy of my enemy is my new best friend, right? Like, weird. Wall Street Mav says Obama and Biden funded and armed these radical Islamic groups in Syria. Now they're going to become the new government in Syria. Is this an improvement? Assad was a dictator, but he wasn't launching a holy war in the Middle East. These guys want to. So Radio Genoa is reporting the Islamic terrorists who conquered Syria say they will now move towards Israel to conquer Jerusalem and liberate Gaza because Allah wills this. So there you go. Things are changing in that region. This whole conflict is shifting, although I'd be interested to see what the color on Hezbollah and their response is, because like this kind of ratchets things up. But according to Biden, Hezbollah is on their back, but I don't believe a word Biden says, so I'll have to find out what the real story is. CAG says, anyone telling you Assad being taken out is part of the plan, and the plan I think is whatever plan Q had, or Trump Q, the Trump plan, whatever it is, I think they're both the same plan, is delusional or uninformed. This goes against everything Trump stopped during his last administration. Trump cut CIA funding for Israel's war in Syria and was fighting Israel-backed ISIS and Al-Qaeda, which is who just took over. So I think there's messages in what just happened for Trump. Does that make sense? Like the people who took over, it's a message in and of itself, and Trump is smart enough to get the message. right? UN says Romania cannot have an election because of foreign interference, according to the same people who are handpicking who will run Syria for Washington and Jerusalem interests, Washington and Israel interests, right? And so that's interesting. I told you yesterday they were able to run an election, but the wrong guy won. And so they said, no, that doesn't count. And now we're not going to run elections. This is BBC reporting. We don't know yet what approach Damascus will take to the U.S. presence in Syria, but it seems likely Washington will now push for a negotiated stabilization of the country, leaning heavily on its favored factions. Earlier in Syria's civil war, President Obama gave his permission for limited backing for what the U.S. saw as moderate rebels elsewhere in the country. That was later abandoned as extremists began dominating the battlefield and Russia entered the war on Assad's behalf. Washington has since backed the United Nations process for a negotiated settlement between Assad and opposition forces. It's likely this will transition to U.S. calls for a mediated outcome between the rebels and the remnants of Assad's regime. The group that led the fortnight-long charge to Damascus, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS. I said yesterday I'd never heard of them, and during Kitchen Table Talk, I think it was Max, but maybe it was somebody else, maybe MC. Sorry if I can't remember who it was. I apologize. They were telling me that HTS is a direct offshoot of Al Qaeda. I think it was Al Qaeda. Goodness, I should rewatch it. My goodness. Anyway, they've been around for a while is the point. And they had repeatedly signaled its apparent rebrand, rejecting violent revenge and abandoning its former links to Al Qaeda. Washington will be deeply distrustful of this group, which it is designated as foreign terrorist organization. Interesting. Right. So it's just like we're distancing ourselves from Al Qaeda. Now we're just HTS. Right. It's just like a phone maker. Right. No problem. So it seems weird. It seems very interesting. Justin Trudeau's really happy about Al Qaeda taking over. The fall of Assad's dictatorship, he says, ends decades of brutal oppression. A new chapter for Syria can begin here, one free of terrorism and suffering for the Syrian people. I don't think this tweet's going to age well. Canada is monitoring this transition closely. It's not a transition. It was a military coup. Like they were going to kill him if he wasn't there, if he hadn't escaped to Russia. We urge order, stability, and respect for human rights. I don't believe him. I don't believe him at all. Balaclava says, refugees going back then? We going to send those guys back? No. Kirk says Justin Trudeau and the Liberals are absolutely clueless to what's going on in Syria. It's only a matter of time before we send money to another terrorist group. Anita Anand is responding to Justin Trudeau's tweet, which I just read, and she says, a new chapter for Syria will begin here. Yes, the chapter of bilking on Western tax dollars to make their leaders fat and, sitting in palaces and things like that. CTV News says, Trudeau says fall of Assad ends decades of brutal opposition for Syria. There's nothing new in this article. There's nothing new at all in this article. I thought the article was going to have some kind of insight. Nope. No insight whatsoever. It's ridiculous. It talks about some of Trump's tweets and his response, et cetera, et cetera. So we know everything that's in that article already, so I won't waste our time. Here is Trump talking about Justin Trudeau and the tariffs. These are a big deal, and we in Canada don't seem to be taking Trump at his word that this is a big deal. He says, these are the things that I want you to deal with. The borders, the criminals coming over the borders, and the drugs coming over the borders with the criminals, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the things I want you to deal with them. And Canada seems hell-bent on ignoring that and saying, I don't know, Orange Man bad? It's ridiculous. Here's Trump in his first exclusive NBC interview with Meet the Press yesterday, and he's talking about Justin Trudeau. Here we go.
So I spoke with Justin Trudeau. In fact, he flew to Mar-a-Lago within about 15 seconds after the call. And he was at Mar-a-Lago. We were having dinner talking about it. I said, you have to close up your borders because they're coming in the northern border too a lot. Not like the southern border, but they're coming in the Canadian border a lot. And drugs are pouring in. Almost as importantly, drugs are pouring in. Maybe more importantly, drugs are pouring in at levels never seen before. 10 times what we had. They're just pouring in. We can't have open borders. And I said to the president of Mexico and to Justin Trudeau, if it doesn't stop, I'm going to put tariffs on your country at about 25%. That's a very substantial tariff. So I spoke with Justin.
Yep, and he talks about Mexico as well. There's a longer clip, but 25%. He also says if we're gonna subsidize, I've got the longer clip at the end of the show. We talk about the U.S. at the end of the show, but he says if we're going to subsidize the United States, if the United States is going to subsidize Canada and Mexico to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, Canada's 100 billion, Mexico's 300 billion, according to Trump. They may as well become states. We're subsidizing them. We may as well get the benefit. You know what I mean? And I don't disagree with them. And also, we should kick out the idiot leaders who are hamstringing our rich ass country into a state that can't stand on its own. I mean, our GDP is lagging behind the United States GDP by 40%. People are talking about leaving the country, and they're making a good case for crying out loud. Brett says, reporter, in an interview this morning, Donald Trump again floated the idea of Canada becoming the 51st state of the United States. Are you concerned that the president-elect repeatedly brings up this idea of annexing the country? Poilievre is quick on his feet, and he is able to stay on message in a way that I have not seen in other politicians. They often get led astray. Poilievre is very able to pivot to what he wants to talk about in a way that is almost invisible to most people. So he's asked, what do you think about that? And he says, Justin Trudeau's a weak leader. So it's good. He pivots right to his stump speech, but he sounds like he's answering the question, which I guess is the ideal. Here you go.
Interview this morning, Donald Trump.
Oh, too fast. Sorry, everyone. La, la, la. We'll slow it down.
In an interview this morning, Donald Trump again floated the idea of Canada becoming the 51st state of the United States. Are you concerned that the president-elect repeatedly brings up this idea of annexing our country?
Well, the bottom line is that that Justin Trudeau is a weak leader, and he gains no respect from countries all around the world. Canada should have a strong, smart leader with the brains and backbone to put our country first. And that's what I will do. We will have common sense conservatives will put Canada first. We will remove the crippling taxes and debt that have weakened our country under Trudeau. We will unleash the production of our resources to make ourselves more economically independent. We will rebuild our military and secure our borders, and we will go into negotiations with our American friends in a position of strength rather than weakness. Canada will be independent, strong, and proud, and our flag, the maple leaf, will fly proudly again over our country. Thank you.
Instead of the rainbow communist flag that we've allowed to take over? Because that's what's happened. Here's Eva Chipik. She says, if you could leave Canada today and live in another country, would you? Please say why or why not in the comments. There were 71,000 votes. 71,000 votes. And of those 71,000 votes, 77% said, yes, I would leave right now. 22% said no. And Jordan Peterson left. He's living in Arizona. And him and his daughter are talking about how much easier everything is in the United States than it is compared to Canada. And I think this is part of this conversation.
This is why I'm glad you're now living in Scottsdale and not in Toronto.
Hey, well, it's no wonder. Do you know that Canadians are now poorer per capita with regard to GDP than people who live in Mississippi? Canada is poorer. The richest province in Canada is poorer than the poorest state in the United States. And that's all happened since Trudeau, all of it. Canada was basically at parity a decade ago, and the Americans are basically 40% ahead. You know, and you can see why, because what happens is that as soon as you're successful anywhere in the world, if you have any sense, you move to the United States, because everything is way easier here, and you don't get hassled as much.
They go on about that a little bit. To the extent where I think things are easier, they're certainly, I mean, they're poisoning the food in the United States and have been for the last couple of decades. So there's a big difference between like the quality of food you're eating if you choose to eat a lot of the processed foods in the United States. It seems like there's no protections for consumers. Healthcare is a bit better. Education's mixed. I think there's a lot of pitfalls. You could, even in Florida, there were very militant mask people, whereas in Canada, I was able to navigate a situation where they couldn't force my kids to wear masks, and that's good. The school system's a nightmare in Canada too. About the same nightmare it is in the United States, although the United States has pockets and charter schools, and there's kind of different tools being deployed in the United States to get to where we are in Canada. I don't know that it's all better in the United States, but you are earning more things are cheaper on the whole. $2.50 milk for the same milk that we spend $7 on, or $6.50 on, depending on where you are, more if you're in Newfoundland. So like there are benefits to the United States, but I don't know that it's all encompassing like how he's saying. And I mean, at certain levels as well, it's much easier. You get access to things in a way that you can't in Canada and other countries, et cetera, et cetera. So it's interesting that the sentiment is people want to leave. Yeah. And I can't blame them. I can't blame them. The people in charge have destroyed this country in a way that is very demoralizing, and people who don't think about what's going on just feel like that pressure, that demoralized pressure, and they just want to get out of it, right? And so like if you're not being taxed through the nose on useless things and having your money redistributed to NGOs for useless things, that depressing thing kind of seems lighter, right? Like, but again, you have to define your life for yourself. Don't let other people convince you you're depressed by using a measuring stick that they would apply to themselves. You are your own individual, and you should use your own measuring stick. And if you're not happy, then find something that you can do that'll change that, and then work to change it. Do it slowly. Small changes create, like small habitual changes daily, create big changes for your life. Does that make sense? Anyway, back to this. Theo Fleury says, our government is out of control. Enough is enough. People want to leave. Right, same thing. U.S. government finds that Canada's Trudeau government used, quote, assault-style weapons of war against Canadians. The findings of the United States Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic, released December 2nd, 2024, determined that Canadian government forces deployed automatic weapons on peaceful protesters in downtown Ottawa from February 14th to February 20th, 2022, demand immediate legal accountability. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like all of the coronavirus spending, all of the coronavirus communications, all of the coronavirus spending on communications, like the ads they ran, the coronavirus monster in Alberta, Jason Kenney, all of this needs to be reviewed. How much money did we spend on that? Why did you think it was a good idea to personify the coronavirus as a monster on television commercials? Why did you think, how much did that cost you? Sorry, how much did that cost Albertans that you approved? Like, it all requires legal accountability, right? The actions of law enforcement in Ottawa during this period could be formally charged under the Criminal Code of Canada. Yeah. And like, there are so many things that happen. If I told you, here's this product I acquired and it's safe and effective, here you go, and then you get injured by that, I would probably get in trouble. But if the government does it, no problem. In fact, we'll re-elect those guys. And also, if you call them out on the election trail, then you're going to be called alt-right and all sorts of ridiculous names. That's insanity. So again, I don't blame people for wanting to leave. Honestly, I really don't. It's kind of interesting. There are people who are really mad at Jordan Peterson saying, you know, you're a traitor and blah, 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 blah. And other people who are like, yeah, I'd leave too. I think this whole thing is coming wherever you are. I don't think Arizona is going to be safe from all of this. So what do they say? Tribe and train. Like, find your community, get resilient, and say no. I think that's it. I think that's all we can do at this point in time. You say no. You say no to the tyrants, right? Learn history. Be informed about history. Tracy Wilson is responding to this. Chris says the expansion of the federal firearms ban will do nothing to stop gun violence in our streets. Nothing. This is our grab bag of governance, by the way. Tracy says this is a former OPP commissioner. So he's writing articles about the Liberals' desperate attempt to reframe the last 9 years into not a complete and utter disaster that has been destroying our economy and our culture. Gun bans will fix it. Yeah, and abortion. Yay, let's all kill the babies. Lion Advocacy is highlighting this Bill Blair speech. He says, here's the Minister of National Defense admitting to working very closely with our friends in the Ukraine to draft new laws and orders to criminalize Canadians who own certain firearms so that they may be used in Ukraine to fight Russia. This legislative perfidy will decimate the Liberals. Yeah, I think that they just look stupid. I think that they make themselves look more stupid every single day. And I think more people see how stupid they are with their continued exposure, right? As they continue to make themselves look stupid, more people look at it and go, wow, that's stupid, and wake up to it, right? And so, I mean, they're at 21% in the polls. We'll look at that in a minute. There's an election series of tabs somewhere in here. We'll look at that in a minute. True North is reporting Western Canada is home to 4 criminal organizations considered high-level threats to national security. Only 4? According to Criminal Intelligence Services. The article goes through it, I guess, kind of, but doesn't name them, but speculates on 2 of them. While the agency, CSIS, did not address the high-level threat groups by name, its description of 2 of the Western gangs appears similar to the BC-based Wolfpack Gang Alliance and the United Nations Gang. And it's interesting that we can't nail down the 4 big gangs that are operating in Western Canada. And does Western Canada include BC? Because if Western Canada includes BC, there are big, heavy-hitting Chinese gangs. Like, just look at what Andy Lee's posting, for crying out loud. They're heavy-hitting Chinese gangs, triads, and there's another big one, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but like the triads are one. Operating out of BC, Canada. And I mean, there are people who are way more knowledgeable. Like BC, I've never been to BC. It's far away. I apologize that I'm not as well versed in BC. They like to have rigged elections. They like to have conservatives who are pretending to be conservatives who won't fight for a fair election. That's all I know about BC. I apologize that I'm not aware of the gang operations in BC. The senators seem to be in on it too. The casinos seem to be in on it too. The real estate seems to be in on it too. There are some heavy-hitting, big fucking gangs happening in British Columbia, and these guys are like, oh, only 4. Bullshit, 4. Like, 4. That's just the appetizer, for crying out loud. We haven't even got to the main course.
Including the former Syrian.
This is further. This goes through the Punjab Mafia. Okay, so this goes through the Punjabi Mafia and Ranjit Chima, and it goes through a breakdown, like really, really painstaking, 5 minutes long, well worth the watch, of this gang and all of the people involved in it. And it's got names of big players, like very, very public. All of the cases against these people just collapse, right? And it goes all the way through. And remember yesterday when Suk Dhaliwal was threatening another MP because he wanted a motion passed under unanimous consent, and the MP said no, and he said, I'm going to mess you up type deal, like, don't you dare. Anyway, Suk Dhaliwal has connections to the Ranjit Chima, and if you want to have like a lot of its history on this guy, but he's a drug dealer and a criminal and all the rest of it, right? And he's been extradited to the United States and done time in Canada and all sorts of stuff, but he's got connections to Suk Dhaliwal, and like, pretty crazy. There's pretty crazy connections here, right? Do you believe in coincidences? So we have some unbelievable gang stuff going on, and we're being massaged. We're being told, don't worry, it's just 4 and some others. 4, just 4 big ones. Yeah, right. Just 4. What about the trucking gangs? Like, what about the gangs of people who took over the trucking industry in Canada? Like, and they're identifiable. I could point them out, I'm pretty sure. I think I could drive around and go to some trucking yards and like, you'd know what I was talking about and I wouldn't need to say anything. Here is an interview, and these guys are talking about, and I laugh, but I shouldn't laugh. CBC Watcher says, hope Trump doesn't see this. Fingers crossed. Watch Mercedes Stevenson interview National President of Customs and Immigration Union, Mark Weber. Quote, we search less than 1% of what comes into Canada. Like, where some people see a terrible, concerning security flaw, other people see opportunity, right? Like Suk Dhaliwal. I mean, what's his name? Chima. His last name's Chima. Ranjit Chima, right? Who sees the opportunity there? Less than 1%? Who made that happen? Why are we sending money to Ukraine when we're searching less than 1% of the things that come into Canada amid a fentanyl crisis that's killing a lot of people and criminals killing a lot of people? Are people hiding in vehicles on train cars? Are people just coming over, riding on top of train cars, and everybody's like, can't see nothing? That'd be a lot of paperwork. Because I've been in jobs with people who do things like that. Here you go.
Let's talk about searching equipment, because we talked about people, but I was surprised to learn, and perhaps this makes me very naive, but that the CBSA doesn't have the capacity in terms of officers or technology, for example, to search the vast majority of containers that are coming into the Port of Vancouver, and we know that's a huge fentanyl entry port. Can you talk to us a little bit about what the ability of the CBSA is to seize and investigate, in particular, drugs in Canada when they're coming in?
Yeah, I mean, we do have good intelligence. We work very hard at it. Again, it's simply a matter of more. We need more people. We need more equipment. We search less than 1% of what comes into Canada. Modes like rail.
Less than 1%?
Rail, we don't do at all. We don't look at whatsoever. We don't know what comes in via train. Again, we don't have the infrastructure. Wow. We don't have the people to actually do that work.
I just wanted to ask you to go back on rail. With rail, is that an inability to search just the products coming across, or is that people as well?
Could be either. Could products, people. We don't have the infrastructure to do those searches. There's plans underway to allow us to do that work on the U.S. side because there are ports where they have the infrastructure to do that. But again, that's really something Canada should be investing in.
Yeah, I thought it was funny when she said, like, only, was it 1%? I thought she was going to look at the camera. I thought she was going to do a gym look at the camera, but she did not do a gym look at the camera. I definitely thought that was coming. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful